While Texans were drowning, Chelsea Clinton was tweeting, blaming the victims while families fought to survive. But then JD Vance stepped in, and what he said was so brutal, so raw, it left Chelsea speechless and in tears. This story isn't just about a tweet. It's about arrogance, disaster, and a senator who wasn't afraid to call it out. It started with a forecast that no one took lightly, but no one could have predicted just how bad it would get. In the early days of July, an unrelenting storm system stalled over eastern Texas, dumping inches upon inches of rain with terrifying speed. What began as a heavy downpour quickly escalated into a full-blown crisis. Cities like Houston, Beaumont, and Tyler were hit hard. Rivers overflowed, reservoirs breached, and within just 48 hours, entire communities vanished underwater. Streets transformed into rushing rivers. Parking lots became lakes. Family homes, places of comfort and memories, were swallowed by dirty floodwater. Cars floated like toys, crashing into buildings. In some towns, the water rose so fast, people had only minutes to react. They didn't have time to pack bags or grab valuables. They had to run. Emergency sirens wailed. Helicopters hovered overhead. Local fire departments and National Guard units scrambled to deploy rescue boats. Across counties, first responders waded through waist-deep water, banging on doors, pulling children from rooftops, and carrying the elderly to safety on makeshift rafts. And yet, for all the bravery shown by emergency crews, the destruction was unstoppable. Shelters filled up within hours. High school gymnasiums, church basements, and even abandoned retail stores were converted into temporary safe zones. Mothers with newborns slept on cots next to strangers. Entire families huddled together with only the clothes on their backs. Pets barked and meowed, scared and separated from their owners. One woman, 62-year-old Judith Martin from Liberty County, stood in front of what used to be her home and told a local reporter, her voice cracking, 40 years I lived here, and in less than an hour, it's all gone. The flood didn't care about race, income, or political affiliation. It hit the rich and the poor, conservatives and liberals alike. Nature wasn't picking sides. It was just destroying everything in its path. Videos quickly flooded social media, pun intended. Some showed heroic rescues. A father swimming across a rushing current with his baby above his head. A group of teens forming a human chain to help an elderly man trapped in his truck. A firefighter breaking through a window to pull a dog from a sinking house. Others were harder to watch. People crying in waist-deep water. Entire streets lined with soaked mattresses and ruined furniture. Families sobbing over lost photo albums, wedding rings, and memories they'd never get back. And then came the darker headlines. A child drowned in a backyard pool that had become a swamp. An elderly couple, both disabled, were found too late in their flooded home. Power outages left nursing homes without air conditioning. Hospital patients had to be evacuated in the pouring rain. Every hour brought more heartbreak. But amid the chaos, Texans did what Texans always do. They showed up for each other. Volunteers came from miles away, bringing food, water, blankets, and clothing. Farmers brought livestock trailers to rescue stranded pets. Off-duty truckers used their rigs to pull people from flooded roads. Local restaurants cooked meals for shelter-goers without charging a dime. One of the most viral videos showed a 17-year-old boy named Marcus Washington kayaking through his neighborhood with a rope tied to his waist, pulling a small inflatable boat with his two younger siblings and their dog. When asked why he risked it, he simply said, "Because nobody else was coming, and I wasn't leaving them behind." The entire country watched in shock and awe. For a few days, politics paused. People donated, prayed, and shared stories. Hashtags like hashtag Texas Strong and hashtag Flood Relief started trending. Donations poured in. Churches across the nation held drives. Even rival sports teams joined hands to raise money for affected families. But just as this wave of support was peaking, something unexpected happened. And it came from someone no one expected. Instead of joining the voices of compassion, former First Daughter Chelsea Clinton sparked a political firestorm. But before we get to that, let's pause and reflect. This wasn't just a flood. This was a once-in-a-generation disaster. According to the National Weather Service, some areas received over 25 inches of rain in just 3 days. That's more than some towns get in an entire year. The economic toll? Likely in the billions. But the emotional toll? That's unmeasurable. And let's not forget the survivors. The real people whose lives will never be the same. Like Anthony and Rochelle Green, who had just bought their first home 2 months before the flood. They'd spent their savings painting the nursery for their unborn child. When the water came, Rochelle was 8 months pregnant. Anthony carried her out on his back as the floodwaters climbed their porch. "We made it out," he later told a local station, holding back tears. But the baby's crib, the clothes, the ultrasound photos, everything's gone. Or Maribel Torres, a single mother of 3, who now lives in a Red Cross shelter and doesn't know where she'll go next. "I've never asked anyone for help before," she said. "But now, I have no choice." These are the voices that define what happened in Texas. These are the faces behind the headlines. And in moments like these, when tragedy strips away all distractions, the last thing victims need is blame, mockery, or political point scoring. Unfortunately, that's exactly what came next. In the middle of this heartbreak, as the state tried to rally and rebuild, Chelsea Clinton sent out one tweet, a single message that changed the tone of the entire national conversation. One sentence, and suddenly the compassion turned to outrage. Stay tuned, because in the next part of this story, we reveal the exact words Chelsea posted, why they infuriated millions, and how JD Vance's response flipped the internet upside down and left Chelsea Clinton in tears. But even as the rain slowed and the skies began to clear, the real crisis had only just begun. Water receded in some areas, but what it left behind was almost worse than the flood itself. Streets were layered with thick mud. Power lines dangled like snakes over soggy sidewalks. Cars were crushed against trees. Mold crept up the walls of homes within days. The air smelled of sewage, rot, and despair. Families returned to find everything they owned destroyed. Baby photos, wedding dresses, graduation certificates, and decades of memories. For some, insurance wouldn't cover a penny, either because they didn't have flood coverage or the bureaucracy was too slow to act. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Pharmacies couldn't refill prescriptions fast enough. Schools were closed indefinitely, with classrooms submerged and textbooks floating in the hallways. In rural areas, clean drinking water became a luxury, and even food deliveries were delayed due to road damage. And yet, even in the worst of it, people clung to hope. Churches held outdoor prayer vigils. Children wrote thank you notes to firefighters. One man stood outside his destroyed home holding a sign that read, "We lost everything," unfiltered, deeply. In the midst of chaos and heartbreak, as Texans waded through floodwaters and clung to life, the last thing anyone expected was a political grenade, especially from someone as high-profile as Chelsea Clinton. But that's exactly what happened. While volunteers formed human chains to rescue the stranded and strangers handed out water bottles from the backs of pickup trucks, Chelsea Clinton, daughter of former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, took to social media. She didn't post a message of unity. She didn't share resources or donation links. She didn't say, "Praying for Texas," or "Let's come together." Instead, she tweeted out a single, stunning message that would light up the internet like wildfire. The post featured an aerial photo of the flooding, one showing rows of homes completely underwater, and her caption read, "This is what happens when you deny climate change and keep voting for anti-science Republicans. Texas, wake up." No context, no compassion, no mention of the families still waiting to be rescued. Just a raw, divisive jab that turned the suffering of thousands into a political talking point. And within minutes, America exploded. A nation in shock. The reaction wasn't just fast, it was ferocious. Texans were outraged. So were Democrats, independents, even moderates who had once supported the Clinton family. Social media feeds filled with disbelief. Some users thought the tweet had to be fake. Others hoped it had been posted by mistake. But it wasn't. It was real, and it came from a verified account of one of the most well-known political voices in the country. Twitter users immediately fired back. One comment read, "My house is underwater. I'm sleeping in a shelter with my 2 kids. And you want to talk politics? Shame on you." Another said, "People are dying, and Chelsea Clinton is doing victory laps for being right about climate change. This is evil." Texans weren't the only ones offended. Even people far outside of the Lone Star State found the comment disturbing. In Michigan, one user wrote, "You don't kick people when they're down. This isn't politics, it's human suffering. Disgusting." Even Democrats distanced themselves. The backlash grew so intense that even prominent Democrats began to speak out. Some did so subtly, others more bluntly. A well-known Democratic strategist tweeted, "This was a deeply unhelpful message at the worst possible time. Timing matters." Another left-leaning journalist wrote, "You can believe in climate change and still know this tweet was wrong." One high-ranking staffer for a sitting Democratic senator, speaking off the record, reportedly told a journalist, "Everyone's shaking their head right now. We're trying to help, not alienate." She just handed Republicans a gift. No apology, no retraction, just silence. As criticism poured in from all directions, Chelsea Clinton did something that made things worse. She went silent. She didn't issue a clarification. She didn't say, "I spoke too soon," or "Even my heart breaks for Texas." She simply let the tweet sit there for hours. Eventually, after being quote tweeted by thousands of angry users and receiving coverage on nearly every major network, she deleted it. No comment, no explanation, nothing. And for many, that was the final insult. In times of crisis, Americans often look to public figures not for solutions, but for solidarity. They want to know that people with power care. They want to feel seen, not judged. Instead, Chelsea's tweet felt like a slap in the face. The human toll of her words. What made her comment especially painful was the timing. At the very moment she posted it, real people were still being rescued from rising waters. Entire families were huddled in attics. First responders were risking their lives in boats to save strangers they'd never met. In the background, tragedy was still unfolding. In Harris County, a mother and her 2 children were swept away trying to cross a flooded bridge. A day later, the children's bodies were found downstream. That same night, volunteers in Jefferson County formed a chain to pull an unconscious man from his submerged truck. He was revived barely. Meanwhile, Clinton was online, sending the message that Texans somehow deserve this because of how they vote. Imagine being one of those families. Imagine seeing your entire life disappear beneath brown water, only to open your phone and find someone from a political dynasty, someone safe, dry, and privileged blaming you for it. That's what cut deepest. One woman in Port Arthur, standing outside a flooded shelter, told a local news station, "I voted Democrat my whole life. But today I don't care who's a Democrat or Republican. We're all just trying to survive." The media circus begins. The mainstream media couldn't ignore it. Within hours, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and nearly every major outlet covered the tweet. Commentators debated whether it was a climate truth or a moral failure. Op-eds popped up on both sides. Some liberal pundits attempted to defend Clinton, calling the message factually accurate or a wake-up call. But even those voices acknowledged the poor timing. Conservative commentators, meanwhile, pounced. They called it elitism, arrogance, and the perfect example of how disconnected the political class has become from real America. One Fox News host said, "The Clintons were once called the champions of the working class. Now their daughter sits in a New York apartment tweeting down judgment on hurricane victims. Disgraceful." The online backlash was so strong. Hashtags like hashtag Chelsea Clinton, hashtag Texas floods, and hashtag Tone Deaf Elite began trending across platforms. Behind the scenes, Clinton family friction? According to anonymous sources close to the Clinton Foundation, even Bill and Hillary Clinton were reportedly displeased with the fallout. While there's no official statement, one source claimed, "They know how bad this looks. It's not the kind of attention the family wants, especially not now." Insiders say Chelsea has always been more outspoken on social media than her parents, but this incident may have finally crossed the line. An opening for JD Vance. What Chelsea Clinton didn't realize in the moment was that her tweet didn't just anger everyday Americans. It also handed a perfect opportunity to a rising political opponent. Within 24 hours, Senator JD Vance, the Republican from Ohio known for his no-nonsense, populist tone, released a response that would flip the entire narrative upside down. Standing knee-deep in flood mud in Texas, Vance delivered a message so fiery, so unfiltered, and so perfectly timed that even some of Clinton's former supporters admitted he won this round. But we'll get to that in the next part of the story. The big picture. At the end of the day, Chelsea Clinton's tweet wasn't just poorly timed. It was a reflection of something deeper. It exposed a growing disconnect between America's political elite and the everyday citizens they claim to care about. While regular people were tearing up carpet, saving pets, and comforting neighbors, Chelsea Clinton used their suffering to score political points. And that's something voters, left, right, and center, won't forget anytime soon. Stay tuned, because in the next chapter, we break down JD Vance's brutal response, the viral moment that silenced critics, and how one senator managed to turn outrage into action.